Hi everyone and welcome to our webinar. Today I will introduce Revenue and Expense Deferrals by SYSTRONICS. Revenue and Expense Deferrals is an application that helps companies with amortization of maintenance and service-related contract revenue and expense amounts over the life of the contract. Please note that the application can be configured to process transactions from any Sage 300 module, including third-party applications, as long as they support the Transaction Analysis and Optional Fields Creator module and post the transactions to GL. Now let's see how the application works. The application does three things to accomplish the task of amortizing revenue and expense amounts throughout the contract period. First, it identifies the transactions that should be deferred. Then, it defers the revenue and expense amounts and creates schedule for recognition. Finally, it recognizes amounts as per the created schedule. Let's look at an example. Suppose we have an invoice on January 1st for $2,400. When we post the invoice in Sage 300, $2,400 is credited to our sales account and $2,400 is debited to our receivables control account. This is standard Sage 300 accounting. Now, if we are using revenue and expense deferrals, we can configure the sales amount to be deferred. When we run the application, it will identify the transaction as one to be deferred, and then the amount, $2,400, will be moved from the revenue account to the deferred revenue account. In other words, our sales account will be debited and the deferred revenue account will be credited. Then, a schedule for recognition will be created. Let's say the contract is for 1 year, so the amounts will be split into 12 portions. That means that each month, $200 will be recognized as revenue. That is, by running revenue and expense deferral each month, $200 will be credited to our sales account and debited to the deferred revenue account. This will keep going until the end of the year. So let's compare accounting with and without revenue and expense deferrals. Without revenue and expense deferrals, your entire revenue of $2,400 is recognized in January. With revenue and expense deferrals, you have $200 recognized revenue in January, $400 in February, $600 in March, and so on. The entire amount will be recognized only in December. Now let's see how the application works in Sage 300. Let's say I have sold a subscription contract and I want to enter an order for it. I know that the revenue amount from the contract should be deferred. Let's enter the customer number and the item number. The quantity is 1 and the price is 1,000. This will be my revenue. So far, it's a standard Sage 300 order. Now, I know that the revenue amount from this contract should be deferred. That's why I will specify some optional field values. In the Defer From field, I will enter the beginning day of the contract. And in the Defer To field, I will define the last day of the contract. Let's say the contract is for 1 year. For the deferment period, I enter the frequency of recognition. Let's say I want to recognize some portion of the revenue each month, so I'm entering calendar month in this field. For hourly method, I'm selecting straight line because I want equal amounts to be recognized during each period. Why not using a template this time? So these are required optional fields by RD, and the deferral information will be taken from these optional fields. Let's ship the entire amount and create an invoice immediately. It's very important that your Sage 300 is configured in a way that the optional fields and their values flow from one module to another and reach GL. Why is it so important? Because revenue and expense deferrals considers only those transactions that have been posted in GL and that have the required optional fields and correct values for those fields. Now let's go to AR and see the invoice that was just created. We're going to check if the required optional fields are here for the AR invoice as well. I can see that the optional fields are here, and I can now post my AR invoice. The invoice is posted, so let's find the transaction in the general ledger. And again, make sure that for the sales account line, the optional fields, the detailed optional fields are here. I'm happy with what I see, so I can now post the transaction in the general ledger. Now I can go to Revenue and Expense Deferral module and run RD processing. When I run RD processing, I can expect the revenue amount to be deferred. Now, starting from version 2018, before clicking on the process button, I can print the Preprocessing Report. The Preprocessing Report shows the transactions that will be deferred once I click the process button. So, fair enough, I have my transaction here, so I know that it will be deferred. If there were any issues with the deferral information I have specified in the optional fields, the transaction will not be deferred and I will find it in the exception list. Now I can click Process. The application tells me that a deferral batch has been created. So let's go to the general ledger and see what the deferral batch looks like. Now, as expected, my revenue was debited from the sales account and the same amount was credited on the deferred revenue account. Okay, now let's go and see the transaction created in the Revenue and Expense Deferrals module. For that, I will open the transaction details screen and go to the last transaction. On the transaction details screen, you can see transaction information, and starting from version 2018, you can drill down to the transaction that was deferred. On the second tab, you can find deferral details, that is the beginning of the contract period, the last day of the period, the recognition frequency, etc. You can also drill down to the deferral batch. Now, on the recognition schedule tab, you can see the recognition schedule created by the application. We can see that equal portions of the revenue will be recognized at the last day of the period, in this case, calendar month. I can see that the first recognition should take place on 31st of January. Since I want to show you the recognition batch, now we will go to RD processing screen again. And here I can change now the processing date so that when I click the process button, we will have a recognition for the transaction. Please note that the RD processing date was added on the screen in the last version. Previously, in order to change the date for which the processing is run, you had to sign out of Sage 300 and sign in with a new session date. Okay, I can see that the recognition batch has been created. Let's have a look at the recognition batch in GL. As expected, a portion of my revenue has been added back to my original sales account. So the sales account was credited and the deferred revenue account was debited. Once again, let's go back to the transaction details screen in Revenue and Expense Deferrals and look at the Recognition Schedule tab. Here I can see that the first line is already recognized. And starting from version 2018, I can also drill down to the recognition batches. You don't have to enter values for 4 or 5 optional fields every time you want to defer a transaction because Revenue and Expense Deferrals supports templates. So on the template, you can define deferral information once, and then you can use only one optional field on the transaction to specify the deferral settings. That optional field is the RD template optional field. So you will just enter the template code as an optional field value, and then whatever is specified on the template will be applied to defer the transaction. For example, let's look at this SAPS 1 template. According to the template, the deferral method is straight line, which means that equal amounts will be recognized during each period, for each period. The defer from date, that is the contract beginning date, is the transaction date. The last day of the contract is transaction date plus 1 year minus 1 day. And I will have a calendar month as a deferment period for the transaction. Let's now create an AP invoice this time. So we will be deferring expense. Let me enter the vendor number. Let's say the amount is 1,000. And this time I'm going to specify a value only for the RD template optional field. My template code is the value for the optional field. Let's assume that there are no taxes for this transaction. And let's post the AP invoice. We can check that the optional field is also in the GL batch and post the batch. Let's go to RD and run processing. Okay, I have another deferral batch created for this transaction. Let's go straight to transaction details. Here I can see that the AP invoice amount was deferred and I only had to use one optional field for that. I would also like to show you the multiple reports and inquiries coming with revenue and expense deferrals. You can print the Audit Log Report to see the transactions created by RD and sent to GL. You can choose to print only deferral transactions, only recognition transactions, or both. The report can be sorted by GL account or RD processing number. Let's print the report. Here you can see the type, that is whether the transaction is a deferral or recognition, and see the details for the transaction. You can print this report for a specific period of time and then compare it with your GL transactions. The next report I would like to show is the Revenue Flash Report. It comes in 3 types: Summary, Report, and starting from version 2018 document balance. The revenue flash report shows how much was deferred for each transaction, how much has been already recognized, and what's the amount still to be recognized for that transaction. Now let's print it first in summary mode. For the transaction, recently entered transaction, we can see that 1,000 was deferred, and as of now 83.33 has been recognized. I still have 916.67 to recognize. Now if I print the same report in detail, I will also see detailed information about each deferral and recognition transaction. For example, I can see that the date of the deferral, the RD processing number, and the same information for the recognition. If you want to print the document balance type, here you specify a period of time, and the report will show you how much was deferred at the beginning of the period, how much was deferred and or recognized during the period. Let's say it's February. And what's the balance, what's the deferral balance at the end of the period. Let's find the familiar transaction. Say this one. Okay, so we can see that as of 1st of January, for this transaction, no amount was deferred or recognized. During the period, 1,000 was deferred, and during the same period, 83.33 was recognized. As of February 1st, we still have 916.67 to recognize. The next report I want to show is the Deferred Revenue Report, which ages the unrecognized revenue or expense amounts, showing how much will be recognized in each of the specified 4 aging periods. You can also define a cutoff date for the report starting from the latest version, and the transactions will be considered, the amounts will be considered deferred or recognized only if the recognition or deferral date is on or before the cutoff date. Let's print the report. I can see that, for example, for this transaction, for the familiar transaction, in a period from 0 to 30 days, I will have $83.33 recognized. The same for the next period, etc. And for the last period, which is over 90 days, I will have 750.01 to recognize. The next report I would like to show is the exceptions report. You would print the exceptions report to see the transactions that most probably should have been deferred but were not because you have entered incorrect or incomplete information, deferral information for the transaction. Okay, I can see that during one of the previous runs, during RD processing number 8, I had 2 lines, 2 amounts that should have been deferred, but I was using the RD template optional field, and as a value for that optional field, I have not entered any existing template code. This is similar to RD Preprocessing Report exceptions section. However, this is a historical report, and the Preprocessing Report, it's a forward-looking report. It's what will happen when you click on the process button. The next report, which was again added in the latest version, is the document expiration report. You can print the document expiry report to track the expiration of contracts and subscriptions. The report shows when the document expires based on the deferred to date of that document. We can see that in a period 90 days and more, I will have 6 contracts or subscriptions expiring. There were also 2 new inquiries added in the latest version. The first one may seem very familiar to you because it's similar to the AR customer inquiry with one valuable addition. Let's select the customer. On the Documents tab, when you select a document that you know for which the amount was deferred, let's find one. You can click the RD Transaction Details button, and it will drill down to the RD Transaction Details for this transaction. Finally, I would like to show you the RDGL comparison inquiry. This inquiry allows to match transactions generated by RD with the transactions in GL. For that, you have to enter the deferred revenue or deferred expense account here, and let's specify some period of time and click the Go button. Now, what do we see in the first grid? On the top left grid, you can see the transactions generated by RD, and for some transactions, you can see the matching batches found in GL. Those are the transactions in black. For those transactions that for which the application was not able to find a matching batch, you can see them in red. Those are exceptions. Well, the most probable reason why they are exception is that I have created the RD batch in GL, but I have not posted it. In the second grid, you would see the transactions that were posted for this account. The transactions are coming from RD, but this account was not used as a deferred revenue or deferred expense account. And in the last grid, you would see the transactions posted for this account coming from any module other than revenue and expense deferrals. We can also compare the total balances in RD and GL. That's all I wanted to tell you about. Thank you for your attention.